Hi, how's your dog doing? Okay, we're just gonna jump right into this video because you know what the title says. Okay, let's start with this hypothetical story. You just so happen to find another Toki Ponist out in the wild. Maybe they're in your city, maybe you were traveling and you found them. Doesn't matter how, you found them. And you're having a lovely conversation. Maybe it's about a very interesting topic, whatever that might be, but for whatever reason, you want to say something like a fruit bat, or an orange, or ibuprofen. So let's use these three words and figure out a way to translate them into Toki Pona. So the first option, if it's an available option, assuming that you're texting with this person or communicating with them over the internet where you can kind of take a pause and wait a little bit, the best thing is just to think about it. Just sit there and think about how you would want to describe it and what would make the most sense to you and what you think would make the most sense to somebody else. Just sit there and think about what would make the most sense to you and what would make the most sense to the other person you're talking to or other people. So while this method is very effective if you're by yourself, you're probably watching this video because you have trouble with this method, and what you think would be a very clear translation or description is not very clear to the people you're talking to. Like maybe if you want to say ibuprofen, you say moku misikeke, which using misikeke, which is a cool word from the Toki Pona dictionary, meaning something to have to do with medicinal purposes or healing purposes. You could translate this to mean healing food or medicinal food, because you do eat pills. However, the person or people you're talking to could assume that you're talking about a medicinal plant, and you're just not specifying enough to show that it is a plant. So while I do think that this option is probably the best one if you want to stay true to the philosophy Toki Pona and to be true to yourself and to be authentic, I don't really think it's the best option unless you have time on your hands to think about this for a couple of seconds, or if you know that you might come up with a different way that other people might not understand. Another option is to consult the Toki Pona dictionary, which I do have a video about right here. This one's actually pretty good. What the Toki Pona dictionary is really useful for is seeing the most common translations so that you can get your point across better. So assuming you went to the Toki Pona dictionary and you want to translate the word orange, the options are from most common to least common. Loye yellow, that's more so for the color. Kili, loye, loye yellow, and kili sui, which all mean red yellow fruit, red yellow red fruit, and sweet fruit. Now most often I would say the kili loye yellow would probably be the most sensible to use because it's the most clear and it gets your point across. So as I have discussed in this video in a greater depth, which I still think you should go check out, don't just listen to this and assume that you got the entire point of that video. It's a very good resource for translators who are trying to translate things such as, say, popular texts, books, that kind of thing, where the audience should probably be able to recognize what the story is about if they're reading it. So it's very good to understand common translations and what people will want to understand. The only con is that obviously you'd have to be hauling this book around with you, and you also have the time to look through it. Another option is to think of your native language and think of synonyms or circumlocutions that you could use. Circumlocution is where you kind of describe a word and work your way around it instead of saying it directly, which is pretty much what you have to do in Toki Pona all the time. So thinking of it in your native language could be useful if that makes sense. For example, if your native language has a very odd way of saying the word fruit bat and it doesn't make any sense, like maybe they say something like fruit-loving flying dog, I don't know, that's probably not real. But assuming they say it that way, it would not make too much sense to describe it that way. Next, you could say it in an Englishy way, which, as this commenter has discussed, is not the best idea because English is not the only language out there. Treating Toki Pona just English but different is not very helpful because Toki Pona is its own language. I think we should be coining terms for different languages and just completely coming up with our own idioms and terms to use, instead of just importing them from English, which is by far the most commonly spoken language among the community. Another thing that I kind of cover in this video, which is that you can use another language you know to find an interesting way to describe it. I mean, for example, you might not know how to say orange, and that seems to make perfect sense to you. You don't know how you break orange down. Well, let's say you know Old English, you'd know that orange was called yellow red in Old English, yellow rad. So you can find a unique way to say it in another language, which is pretty interesting, and again adds some new lexicon and helps you diversify the language's vocabulary and helps to enrich it and make it feel more like a living language. And finally, sometimes you just have to sit and consider whether these things need to be said at all. If you remember the words I chose fruit bat, orange, and ibuprofen. These are words you rarely ever need to say, and if you really do need to say them, You rarely ever need to specify that this is what you're talking about. If you want to say ibuprofen, 99% of the time, through context, just saying misikeke, again meaning medicine, someone will know. At worst, just say sike misikeke, which mean medicinal circle, what, ibuprofen typically comes in some kind of pill shape, which is kind of circular and more of an oval shape, but you get the idea. Most of the time, you're not going to need to specifically refer to an orange. Maybe you would. Again, just use kililoya yellow. You don't need to coin a completely different term to describe an orange. And finally, I can't think of a time when I've said fruit bat in English, my native language. So I have no idea why you would ever need to say fruit bat in Toki Pona. And if you really do, unless you're a zoologist, why do you need to specify that it's a fruit bat? Just say bat. Just say like soeliwaso or something. Come on. It doesn't make any sense. So sometimes you just have to stop and just ask, is what I want to say necessary at all? Toki Pona is a language and is meant for simplicity. It's not a challenge to see how interestingly you can describe words in your native language. Treat it as its own language that just so happens to be simple. Sorry if I sound a little preachy there. I don't really mean to sound that way, but that's the way I came across, I hope. Hopefully that was more funny than it was preachy, but, someone could interpret it in that way. So sometimes you just need to stop and consider if what you need to say needs to be said at all. Sometimes it's better not to speak. And using a quote from Wittgenstein, one of my favorite philosophers, in a context that is not exactly the way it was meant to be intended, but I'll use it anyway because it completely works for this context. Whereof one cannot speak, thereof one must be silent. Sometimes you just don't need to say things. Okay, so hopefully that video was helpful to you in some way. I really did not want to have to make a whole script for this. I just wanted to make something quick and unscripted and have it be a little more fun and loose. So maybe I'll make some more of these. If everything goes how I'm going to plan as I'm recording this, I'm not going to put too much editing in. I'll put some in. Obviously, I'll make cuts. I'll add some stuff in there. It won't be as bare bones as my long unscripted videos, but it won't be as edited as my normal videos. Not filler content. I still want it to be useful, but I will use the scripted videos for more research-based stuff where I want to just teach you something and not really add my own ideas too much to it. I will use these videos, again, if I continue to do this at all, I will use these types of videos that are shorter and unscripted to present my own twist on an idea or something I think you should know, but it's not really research-based. And I will use the long unscripted videos to describe more broad concepts, which are kind of more integral to all of my videos as a whole, so I think you should watch those, but you don't have to. So anyway, I hope this video was helpful to you. If everything goes according to plan, this should be releasing the day after I recorded it, so let's see how that goes. And I guess I have my Patreon. I guess I have my Patreon down there if you want to donate to that and get some cool perks, I guess. But again, your support is more than enough, so I will appreciate it if you donated, so that'd be cool. Anyway, I hope this video was very helpful to you, and I hope everything is going well, and hope you have a very nice day, and tell your dog is a die.